Hi everybody, thanks for joining me today. And hold on just a minute. It's really cold and I'm trying to get my fingers situated here to control my camera. Hi everyone, hello Pennsylvania. I'm going to try to enlarge this just a little bit so you can see a little bit better what's in the background. And back there you can see a little bit of the lovely Manhattan skyline. Hi Mark. Hey Terry. And there we are. So this might give you a little bit of an idea of where I am today, because I'm not going to disclose the specific location. There's the Empire State Building and the World Trade Center. I'm not going to disclose the specific location because I am going to show a monument, and I don't want everyone to know where it is in case someone gets an idea to do something bad to it. Unfortunately, those are the times we're living in. But you can see that we are in a cemetery, and not in Manhattan. So on a rare occasion, I'm not in Manhattan. And so I'm walking up here, and I'm going to give you a better look at this cemetery because many of you might recognize it from some films and TV shows you've seen. So that's the only real hint I'm going to give you about which cemetery it is and where it is. And of course, as we're walking around, if you have any questions about what we pass, please be sure to ask me. And this is the chapel in the center of this cemetery. And I'm just going to walk around a little bit so you can see these. And we have a whole bunch of mausoleums that line this. This is one of my favorite places to walk in this cemetery because it really is like being in a little necropolis, a real like little city with all of these mausoleums. Many of these mausoleums have superb stained glass inside of them, and I did a photo essay some time ago on these stained glass in here. If you go to on Facebook, if you go to Patriot Tours NYC and look through old posts, if you search through stained glass, you'll find a photo essay I did earlier this year on the stained glass in these mausoleums. So here we are back to the chapel. Now the cemetery that we're in obviously is across from Manhattan, so we're on the other side of the East River, and it was created in 1845. This land was purchased in 1845 from the original family that owned it, and we'll be talking about that family as we proceed. And it was bought in 1845 by the original St. Patrick's Church. Now, you all know St. Patrick's for that big monument on Fifth Avenue, but the original St. Patrick's was a little Irish Roman Catholic church in what was known as the 5 Points of Manhattan, or 5 Points of New York City. They ran out of burial space in their little graveyard, which was then on Mulberry Street, and they bought all of the land over here in 1845 to expand their graveyard. Now, I should note that in 1845, the area that we're walking in was not a part of New York City. New York City was only Manhattan Island at that time. So the 5 boroughs, as they're known, were 5 separate counties. And the counties of Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island, and the Bronx were separate, and they were comprised of little towns and villages. And the little town that we're in, walking around in, would have been called Newtown, and that might give some of you also a hint of where I am today. So this was a village or an area called Newtown, and all of this land was farmland that belonged to a family called the Allsup family, who we're going to be talking about at length in a little while as we walk through here. So they bought this land in 1845 from the Allsup family. It was consecrated by Bishop John Hughes, the Roman Catholic Archbishop of New York. And if you know the Civil War period, John Hughes was a somewhat controversial character during that time, and that he had some things we might find very controversial to say about slavery and those sorts of things. So he was a somewhat controversial subject as head of the Roman Catholic Church during the pre-Civil War and Civil War period. Now, I hope I know where I'm walking. Hold on just a second. Yes, I am going the right way. This is a huge cemetery, and it's one of many sections. This is the oldest section of this particular cemetery. So in 1845, St. Patrick's bought all of this land from the Allsup family, and they began extending their cemetery over here. And you might know that cemeteries in the 19th century were also used as picnic areas, places where people walk, and today we'll probably run into some people who are walking through this cemetery as well. So they were also used for recreational purposes, and I just want to give you a little bit more of a, panorama of what it looks like here. And there is some really beautiful statuary in this cemetery besides some of the lovely stained glass. And here's a nice little mausoleum. And let's see, I am heading toward that bridge there, and if you know what that bridge is, you might know where I am as well. And the first monument I'm going to talk about today is the one that I don't want to disclose the location of. And then we're going to head on to that hidden Revolutionary War cemetery, because within this giant cemetery, there is a Revolutionary War period family cemetery preserved. And it's kind of hard to find. Every time I come in here, it's a little difficult for me to navigate around, especially once I get off the sidewalk. And here's a look at all the gravestones. And people are still buried in the cemetery. So it still is a cemetery that's in use here in New York City by the Catholic Archdioceses. And we go through, and you can see there's a mix here of new monuments like this. And no, Dan, I won't tell you. I'll tell you in a private message if you guess right. And then there are some very old monuments right next to them. So we have a great deal of period of time, and there are some monuments that are so worn down, of course, we can't even read them now. And they're all mixed in together, all jumbled and mixed in together. And here's some other old ones. Some of these old limestone monuments didn't fare so well over time. So let me get back on my bearings over to that big monument there that I'm heading toward. And on my camera, it looks a lot further away than it really is. I have an airplane going overhead. Pretty quiet out here today. It's very cold here in New York City. And if you've been following me for a while, you know that I really love the cold. And here's some more of this. And this is just rows and rows and rows. And this is only one section of, I think, 200, I think that the cemetery is about 245 acres in total. And this is just one small section of it. And people walk their dogs in here, people ride their bikes, people go through walks. Oh no, somebody spotted Mr. Q following me around in the car. Oh, hi Janine. Oh, it's great to hear from you. I'm glad you're watching. Happy New Year. Yes, the yellow Jeep you see following me is Mr. Q, because it was too cold for me to walk over here myself, so he drove me over. He's off for a few days. So yes, Mr. Q is lurking around in the background. If you see the yellow Jeep, that's him. Oh, great. And someone put some flags on here to commemorate the first monument we're going to talk about today. And here it is. And it is quite lovely. It was commissioned in 1866. Now, this little piece of land that this monument is on belongs to New York City. New York City bought this piece of land in, I think, 1863 from the cemetery, from Cavalry Cemetery. Oh, and I turned it around so you can see me a little bit here. I didn't mean to do that. I don't want you to see me. I want you to see. And I can't find the button to switch it back. There it is. There we go. You got to see all my dark circles from not sleeping well. Some of you who follow me know that my dog recently had very serious abdominal surgery. He had to have his gallbladder removed, and he's an older dog, and I haven't slept in days being so worried about this surgery that he underwent. But he is doing really, really well and will be home over the weekend. So that's the dark circles you just saw under my eyes, was, me just being very worried about my lovely companion. His name is Lance. So back to the monument. So in 1863, New York City bought this little plot of land here from from the cemetery in order to erect a monument that they commissioned in honor of New York City Civil War veterans who later died in New York City hospitals. And here it is, this beautiful monument. And it starts out with a dedication on the front that it was commissioned by the mayor and aldermen and commonality of New York City. The mayors at that time, I'm not sure if it was the mayor at the beginning of the project, George Updike, or the mayor at the end of the project, who I think was John Hughes. So I'm not sure which mayor it was, not that it really matters. But each one of these beautiful Civil War soldiers is wearing a different type of uniform from the time. And these are bronze, and they're really in need of repair. But one of the things that struck me about this monument is how beautiful they're done. And you can really see the fold of the fabric, how nicely it's done. The expressions on each one of the soldiers' faces are very clear. And you can even see the detail in their boots, the leather of the boots. And this one has a sword that he's carrying. And let's take a look at this one. This one has a completely different expression and a different posture. And we can take a look at this one. Each one of them a unique soldier. This one has a very different mustache than the other, a different hat, standing in a different position, a slightly different type of uniform. You guys who are real Civil War aficionados, you might know what all of these different uniforms represent. I don't. You can even see maybe he's cavalry. He's got spurs on his boots where the other one doesn't, so that's possible. And you can see the folds of his cape. Hi Leah, it's nice to see you today. I'm out here freezing, so you guys don't have to be. He has on a different type of hat. And this one you can see, he's carrying an axe, so I wonder every time I see this if he might be representative of the fire zouaves who went to fight. We had men in New York who signed up as entire fire companies to go fight in the Civil War, so I wonder if he represents some of those firemen who went off to fight. And you see he has a nice long beard. And again, a very different outfit. He has on the belt buckle we're used to seeing in Civil War stores and things, the U.S. belt buckle. And he has on much higher boots, too, than the others. So I wonder if he's a fireman. So there's our third gentleman. And another dedicatory plaque over here. There are, by the way, 21 men buried here, all who served as Union soldiers and then later died in New York City hospitals. I think the last burial here was in 1909. And while I'm talking to you, I just got a text message from a friend of mine in Chicago asking me how my dog is. So he is fine. And you notice he has on a much longer jacket as well. So as I said, some of you who really know the Civil War might know what all of these different uniforms are, what they depict. I do not. And he has a very different posture and expression as well. So very nice. In the middle, I have to back up out of here without tripping over the gate. So give me a moment so we can look at the obelisk. Here we go. Come around. And it was actually just today that I learned what the statue on the top of the obelisk means. I had to search and search and search to find out. So here we have the obelisk, and it has some garland and a star. And the statue on the top of the obelisk, by the way, it's 50 feet of granite, is a woman holding a cross. She represents peace. So let me see if I can make that a little bigger for you to see. Let me see. There she is. So she represents peace, the end of the war. So here we are. Very nice. Now, I also learned today, which I'd never knew before, that there used to be cannon and an eagle placed here on these corner pedestals. And I do not know what happened to them, but as you can imagine, as usual, when I found out they used to be here, I then decided I need to find out what happened to them. So I will do either an article or a follow-up video, letting you know what happened to those eagles and those cannons. So here we are. And we even have a little plaque here saying this is part of the city of New York. So a beautiful monument honoring our Civil War veterans here in New York City. And there are quite a few of these. I also learned today that there's one of these in another cemetery here in New York City, and that the four men look the same, but that this is the original installation of those four statues, that there were casts made, and of course those casts were used for other statuary around the city, but that this is the original installation of these four gentlemen. And now we're going to make our way off to our real destination. I have to get my bearings because the only way I can find this little place is to find the tree right there that marks that I'm near it. And so this is where we're really heading off to see today. And as we go by, you can see more and more of these very old monuments that are completely worn away. You can see these over the time. The limestone has just worn down. I'm sure that the graveyard has a directory of all of these graves. It's not online. Some of you might know that if you go to Trinity Church or St. Paul's Chapel websites from the Manhattan graveyards, that they do have online guides to their cemeteries. You can search by name. You can also click on grave sites and find out who's in the grave sites. But not so in the graveyard we're in today. So this is what we're looking for, this little tiny graveyard. You can see it's surrounded by a fence. When the original St. Patrick's Church acquired this land from the Allsup family, the Allsup family already had a family cemetery here in the midst of their farm. And that cemetery was preserved within the larger cemetery. And you can see some more of the skyline back there. So this is the Allsup family, and I want to go around to the front and see what kind of markings. This is probably the last Alsop who was buried here in 1883, but we want to go over here to these older ones. Now, who were the Alsops? The Allsup family was a pre-Revolutionary War family here in New York who were primarily merchants and farmers, and this entire area we're walking through, which was once called Newtown, was their farm. And we can see all the family graves here. The two brothers who were the patriarchs of the family, John and Richard Alsop, not only were farmers, but they were very successful New York City merchants. Darlene, no, we're still in New York. We're not in New Jersey. So we're on the other side. We're across the East River instead of the Hudson River. So the Alsops came, and Richard and John became very successful merchants, as well as having a farm over here in the town of Newtown. And you can see here's another Richard who at 1 month died as a child. So you have some very old graves here showing us the history of the Allsup family. And this is another Richard. As you know, every other generation has the same names at that time. And here's someone who died in 1772, also at 1 year of age. So this must be the children's section of the graveyard. And here's another one with that typical cemetery marking we see from the time period up on the top. So the Alsops were very successful merchants. They imported cloth and textiles. So I guess Mrs. Q would probably be friendly with them. She would probably know them. And here's an Alsop who died in 1764 at 70 years old. And this is another Richard Alsop. So there's going to be quite a few of them in here, probably named Richard and John and Abigail and Mary, which were the big family names for that time. So they were very successful, very wealthy merchants. And John Alsop himself was a founder of the New York Hospital Society in 1770 and was the first governor of that society. He then went on to serve in the New York Assembly, and he also was elected to serve in the Continental Congress in 1774. And although he was a rebel, he supported things like the non-importation, non-exportation agreements. If you remember those, whenever the colonies became angry at England, we stopped buying and selling with them. And here's a 7-year-old, 2-year-old, 7-year-old who passed away in 1777, a little girl. So whenever the colonies got mad at Britain, we decided we wouldn't sell anything to them or buy anything from them, thus hampering their economy and usually getting what we wanted in return. And the Alsops supported those non-importation agreements. Even though those agreements did great damage to all of the merchants in New York City, they still felt that the the philosophy of that was more important than making money. So they all entered into these non-importation agreements. And John and Richard Allsup used to support those agreements. Now, John Allsup was also friends with John Jay and attended the First Continental Congress with him. He also was then elected to the Second Continental Congress. But what's interesting is when we look at the signatories from New York, he did not sign the Declaration of Independence. So you might know that some of those guys did not, like John Jay didn't sign it. A few did not. James Duane did not sign it. And that is because those gentlemen, although they were rebels and they agreed in principle with disagreeing with England, they still were looking for what they called a redress of grievances. They felt that we should still try to negotiate with England and that the best path was not independence from England. So a bunch of those New York gentlemen did not sign the Declaration of Independence in 1776. A different group of gentlemen signed. So John Allsup did not sign. But later in 1776, we find him with George Washington in Philadelphia, and he's going back and forth from New York to Philadelphia, trying to get supplies for Washington's army, mainly gunpowder. Now, in 1776, earlier in 1776, this area called Newtown was taken by the British, and at that time the Alsops fled to their New York City home, which was on Smith Street, which today is a part of William Street. They fled to their New York City home, but then in September of 1776, New York City was taken by the British, and then they fled to Connecticut. Throughout the war, John Allsup continued to work on securing supplies for Washington's army. So although he didn't sign the Declaration of Independence and didn't initially agree with separation from England, after it happened he was a great patriot and worked hard on behalf of supplying the American army. At the end of the war, of course, the Alsops returned. They came back to their farmland and continued to work and live here. Richard Allsup retired and went to Connecticut. John Allsup returned to New York City, where he again served in various governments. He was the president of the New York City Chamber of Commerce, I think right after the war, so say 1783, 1784, and continued working financially in New York. John Allsup is buried, he and his wife are buried at Trinity Churchyard, although the rest of his family is buried here. Now, they had one daughter, Mary, and she went on to marry Rufus King, who some of you know was a senator, a United States senator, and a good friend of Alexander Hamilton's. And I'm not sure where they're buried. They're certainly not buried in this little rustic graveyard here. But this is the rest of the great Allsup family, merchants, farmers, and great patriots here in the city of New York. Their little graveyard still preserved here in the midst of this greater graveyard, in the midst of this great municipality, New York City. So that is my little tour of the graveyard for you today. Smith Street, Brooklyn, or Manhattan. That, Dan, would be Smith Street in Manhattan, and that would be the section of William Street today that runs between Wall Street and, let me get my bearings right, Wall Street and I think Maiden Lane or John Street. That section of William Street was called Smith Street at the time. That Smith and Wall Street is the corner where the original Bank of New York was, which today is William and Wall. So thank you. So do you have any questions? It's really cold, so I'm not going to spend too much time out here. Here are some little tiny remains of some of these graves. You know what? Maybe before we say goodbye, let me look. If there's a nearby mausoleum, I might just go up to the window just to show you a quick example of that beautiful stained glass work. And here again, I'm just going to give you one final view of this little tiny colonial graveyard tucked away within this larger New York City graveyard. A great memorial to a great New York family. Let's see, do we have one real close by that I can peep into? Or maybe one day I'll just come out and walk mausoleum to mausoleum and show you the stained glass. Maybe that would be a good idea. Let's see, did they have big wakes when someone died? I think the wake probably depended on the religion and the wealth of the family, kind of like it does today. Here's another, oh, here's a really neat one. You know, there are a bunch of these. I don't know if you can see it. The monument here the sculpture here, which is a slain lamb on an altar with a cross, of course representing Jesus. There are a bunch of those from this mid-19th century sculptures that have the slain lamb on them like that. I can't see one that's a little clearer. As you can imagine, I've spent a lot of time walking around in this graveyard trying to figure out a little bit of New York history from looking at the graves, the names, and some of the inscriptions. Was A Winter's Tale filmed here? It may have been. That's not one of the things I'm familiar with that was filmed here. But there were many films done here. I was in here one day and they were shooting for a TV show. They were shooting the TV show Person of Interest in here. Let's see, I don't see a quick and easy mausoleum to get into, so I think maybe what I'll do is on another day I'll come over when it's a little warmer and we'll just take a walk through together and look at the beautiful stained glass and the mausoleums. So I'm going to just close today with another view of this beautiful Civil War monument, and I'll thank all of you for joining me, and I will see you next Friday for another walk around New York City, and we'll look for something else to talk about that most people don't know is here. No, there's no night tours here. This cemetery is closed up at night, so can't get in here except to climb under one of the fences. One of the fences has just enough room that you can get underneath, and I don't think I'm going to tell anybody why I know that and why I know where that location in the fence is. You can just try to imagine yourself why I know that. So thank you all very much. Happy New Year, and I'll see you all next week. Thank you.